Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's episode, I have Devina Bhojwani from Idea Lab International. Devina, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Frank. Thank you for having me on today's show.
Well, it is my pleasure to have you on. So let's kick things off. Why don't you tell us, what is Idea Lab Kids?
Sure. So Idea Lab Kids is an after-school STEM franchise. And we started our journey in 2010. We started as a brand, we started a couple of our own company-run stores and locations, and we saw such a great need for after-school programming in the STEM plus arts space. That's what led into us creating this franchisable concept or this brand in 2017. And we started with our first franchise location in Austin, Texas.
That's so cool. Now you guys, well, the company was founded in 2010. So you guys were at it for about 7 years before you franchised the concept, right?
That's correct. Yeah. We spent a lot of that time, running our own stores, kind of perfecting the brand. And a funny story there is that our first location was out of a Pump It Up rental or inflatable.
Yeah.
So just to see, if there was even demand for it. And we had a line out the door for parents interested in these classes. So when we first started, we were doing parent-child classes, and then that led into us realizing what a great need there was in the after-school space. And I think we see that right now, Frank. All the jobs that we see around us are in the STEM fields, and the need to educate our children in those fields or expose them to STEM is even larger today, if not in the past as well.
Right. And the explosive growth of AI is just going to increase the demand for positions in STEM.
Absolutely. I don't know if anybody who's listening to you has their kids do this, but my kids are using AI, and it's a part of now their school learning curriculum where they're learning on how to use it in the right manner as well.
So franchising back in 2017, when you came on as a co-investor, and then you became president in 2019, tell me a little bit why franchising became the right move for the expansion.
Yeah, so maybe we'll unpack that story a little, Frank, with my own personal story. I've been a franchisee of a different brand, a different children's brand, and I had run 4 of my locations for about 8 years, grew one of my locations to be the top performing in the nation. And really, franchising is for somebody who's never started their first business. That was exactly what the shoes that I was in. I looked to franchising, right? There's an existing business model, there's a brand name to go with it. So with that type of a journey for me personally, being a part of this franchisor brand that was young, that was just starting the franchise, absolutely made sense. And more than that, really, it was even a personal story for me where with my own kids, I wasn't seeing enough of hands-on STEM learning in my children's school, in the after school program. And that was making me kind of look out for other programs that we could, enrich their learning with so that they could be exposed to hands-on STEM learning. And I have a girl and a boy, so you'll hear me talk a lot about gender differences too, because I do believe a lot in equality for children in general. And I think I see that with my own kids is, the girl's not as interested in STEM, but the boy definitely absolutely is. So, I keep pushing her even more.
So you've been franchising now since 2017, and there's 17 franchise locations from what I understand?
That is correct, yes.
Now, you gave me a little background before. Out of the 17, you've got, let's see if my math is right, we have 12 in the US and 5 in Canada.
That is right, yeah. Canada was a surprise to us. It just started happening very organically, where we had area developer come and approach us. And so we have a greater Toronto area developer who grows that market for us. And then there's been a lot of interest in certain other parts of Canada as well. And with Canada and the US, we've kind of got a very similar education system. So the after school program does really well in that space as well.
Now, I understand there's other franchisors in your space, but I'd really love to learn more about Idea Lab and how your business is unique.
So, something that is very unique to us is we've spent a good part of the last couple years, mainly during COVID, where we tried to strengthen our franchises by supporting them with better curriculum. And when I say better curriculum, what we did was we looked internally and we kind of built an internal platform for our franchisees that can be used literally by anybody to teach a hands-on STEM lesson. So we have a platform which is video-based. It's called STEAM On Demand. And that platform gets used by our franchises. So these are 10, 12-minute long videos, 15 minutes even, that get played in the franchise locations, and anybody could follow along with these. So literally, Frank, you could walk in to an Idea Lab location, follow along with these videos, and teach a hands-on, meaningful STEM lesson. These lessons they translate to be about an hour-long session. So typically, a child comes in the after-school program, they get homework help, they get some downtime, they have a snack, and then they work on one or two hands-on STEM projects, just depending on what the facility is doing on that day. So these the videos really help with the staffing resource issue that we're seeing right now, overall, I think nationwide and maybe even in Canada,
Sure.
where our franchisees can hire a high school student or even somebody in college and arm them with this tool to teach hands-on STEM lessons. So that is something that I believe really sets us apart, is a really strong curriculum base. When you as a franchisee come in, you want to be able to be supported with the right curriculum and content, because that's what makes you stand out in the market out there.
Sure. And there's got to be quite a bit of pressure, though, on you as the franchisor to keep updating the curriculum, because technology, it never stops changing. Tell me about how you guys adapt and how often you're changing the curriculum.
Always. That would be the answer to that, Frank. And I think you mentioned right at the start as well, AI, right? So we are leaning in on AI enhanced tools and trying to create AI enhanced quizzes, assessments, games that we're adding on to our platform. So now onto that video lesson, you can add on another possibly whole hour as a teacher, where you could have quizzes, crossword puzzles, things that you could do with the child in your after school program.
Right.
Here, you're not only just growing the child while they're having fun, but you're also sending home resources. Some of our crossword puzzles are PDF versions. They can even go home with the child, so the child can get to continue to work on them. And I don't know about the other parents out there, but I know my child always shrugs when I said, "What did you do in after school?" I don't get much of an answer.
Exactly.
So here you actually have a tangible, hands-on project that comes home. You might even see some of these assessments, quizzes, things that they worked on during their after-school program.
And the kids are having fun, and they don't realize you're really teaching them something.
You absolutely are. And one more point to add there, Frank, would be STEM is, with STEM, what we're doing is we're growing the leaders and innovators for tomorrow. That's truly, if you go to our website too, that's something that we truly believe in, and we want to give back to this next generation. And that's the way we do it, is through these hands-on lessons. And we've got all types of learners at our facilities. Some are hands-on learners, some are maybe Kincentric learners. So just depending on their learning style, this is something that usually works for everybody.
And who are teaching the kids generally? I think you mentioned it's like high school students and is it college students as well?
Depending on the state, definitely depending on what the regulations are in those states, but college going students, high school students, whoever the franchisee can hire and arm with these tools and training tools that we've created on the franchisor side to teach these lessons. And again, it would really depend on their state requirements as well.
But the beauty of it is that you've created the curriculum that's so tight in teaching them through video that a high school or college student can teach them. And at the end of the day, a little kid's going to want to learn from a bigger kid than learn from you or I, right?
That is very true. Yeah. They look at the older kids as mentors, right?
Yeah, of course.
There's a lot of learning that happens there naturally and organically.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how you got started in franchising. Did you guys seek outside help? Or I know, because you said you were a franchisee and in a prior life. So I really kind of want to hear about kind of the birth of the franchise side of the concept for you.
Yeah. So right from the start, we knew when those company-run stores had demand in terms of lessons and classes. There was interest in coding classes, cooking classes, just art classes, anything in the STEM and STEAM fields, that we knew that this was something that could be replicated and franchised. I will say one thing with franchising is there's a lot of compliance. So, we spent a good part of maybe a year and a half, perfecting our franchise disclosure document, coming up with everything that needs to go in there, creating the operations manual and things like that. All of the things that you need to do as a franchisor. And the help that we received at that time, we had advisors, and we also had a board at that time, which we continue to believe in, and we surround ourselves with industry experts in the field. We actually also have somebody who used to be the owner of Pinot's Palette as one of our advisors at the company right now. So we surround ourselves with just experts who are able to help us navigate that space.
That is so smart. Most franchisors, they have a concept, they kind of prove it out, and then they franchise, but they don't necessarily bring in folks with franchise experience, or at least bring on a board of advisors of people with that experience. That is super valuable. Most of us don't go in that way.
Right. And, it's funny, just some advice for your audience listening to us. When you bring in a board of, even your first advisor for that matter, really, these are people just volunteering their time. I think if you ask, seldom we forget how we could just ask people for help, and they take us into their world of how they've done things and how they've grown their franchise. I know, Frank, you yourself grew I-9 Sports, and I'm actually curious to tap into some of your brain and get some advice from you.
Sure. Look, I'm happy. Let's just have a conversation here about it. Any way I can help you. What I'm so interested in is that you came from the opposite side as a franchisee. You get it. You lived as a franchisee. So I would imagine that was a huge influence on you, Devina, when you become a franchisor. You must be like, okay, here are some of the things I loved about being a franchisee, and here's some of the things, now that I'm a franchisor on the other side, I'm going to do things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've lived in their shoes, right? Walked in their shoes. I think the first thing to me is the support that a franchisor can provide. So that's something that's really big within our organization is quick turnaround support, because we know that our franchisees are wearing multiple hats. They are the marketing person, they are the operations person, they might even be teaching a class or driving a bus to pick up their after-school students and bringing them to their facility. You just do what needs to be done at the time for your business. So one of the big things that I would say that stands out for me is quick responses to our franchisees. We have a ticketing system internally, Frank, for our franchisees, and we have a 24 or 48-hour window that we get back to them on. And then the same stands for any new assets or marketing assets that they ask us to be created. We have a very strong team that supports them in their local grassroots marketing. I think that is really critical as part of a franchise brand, is making sure that the community that is around you within your couple-mile radius knows about you. A lot of times parents will say, oh, we drive by your location every single day, we didn't even know you were right there.
Right.
So that's something else that we really believe in supporting, like any of the local grassroots events that families are doing. And then the third thing I would say is that our thing that we really look for in our franchisees is passion for this space.
Yes.
I think that's what makes a successful franchisee. If you're not passionate about, giving back to your community, your neighborhood, educating these children, growing the leaders for tomorrow, then this is not the right business for you. I've come across, so many people in my walk of life, or in general, even when they apply through our franchising system, and we are very quick to tell them, this might not be for you.
That's great. Yeah, we absolutely need to do that. Devina, you know why I think the passion is so underrated is because when people hear that word passion, they think, oh, that person they love what they do and they have an interest. But it's more than that, because having passion means, to me, I also translate that as resilience, because if I really love what I do, I'm going to get through the tough times. And there's not a business that I know of that you're not going to have a tough day or a tough week or tough month or whatever. That's why the passion is so important. It's the reason why so many companies go out of business, is because the person didn't really love what they do, right? And they maybe made decisions that were very short term.
Yeah, no, very true. It's a funny story there to share. We have several franchise owners that will buy, they won't admit to it, but I think they buy these businesses also as such great examples for their own kids, right? Because we see their children walking into these facilities, within a few months of owning the business, and they're helping the other students in class. They might even feel like they're the leader in their own class and teaching classes. We have a franchisee in Houston, Bel Air, who's got a little 5 and 6 year old who walks around saying, "I could teach a class by myself," because she's grown up in the business.
Right.
That's kind of the part of it. That's the beauty of it that we see in these franchise operators.
One of the big questions that comes up with anybody that's starting out in franchising is, how did you get started? Like, how did you sell your first few? So would you share with the audience, where did you find your first 5, 10 franchisees?
Yeah, I would say look internally. Our first franchisee was actually an employee of our corporate office. His name is Adam, and he was moving to Austin at that time. And he had been working with us at corporate, helped us build out the lesson plans and work intensely on building out the franchise operations system. And he put his hand up and said, "You know what, I'm moving to Austin. This is a great opportunity for me to try to build out a location there." And super excited to share with you that he's been doing so well that for 2 years in a row, their location has been selected as the top STEM franchise in Austin, Texas. He's gone on to open to work on his second location, which is very close to completion here.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just working on his mullion sign very recently. So his second location should be up and running in Q4.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
One of the challenges we have when we lead a franchise organization is making the decision that I think we can turn things up, we can accelerate our growth. How do you know, Devina, when you know that you can say we're ready to scale more quickly?
Yeah, great question, Frank. So I think for something that we did intentionally as a brand during the pandemic, we almost paused franchising intentionally because we wanted to strengthen our existing franchisees.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, if you remember at that time, essential care workers had to go into work and they needed somewhere for their children to go. So that was where Idea Lab stepped in. We turned from an after-school support provider to more of an in-school day or daytime provider, where families that had to go into hospitals to work were dropping off their children to Idea Lab facilities, and we were taking care of their, we called it a program that we developed at that time called Idea Lab Plus, where we did the schoolwork with them. But back to answering your question, what we did during that time was we spent a lot of intentional time on building out and strengthening the core curriculum. And now we truly feel like we're at a stage where we can really grow the franchise base. We had said we would pause it during that time. And then now next year, we've even got summer camps. Our popular summer camps are being selected by our franchise council. And that is another set of units and lessons that are being built and grown on so that they can be used by our franchisees. So the summer is a big, busy time for our franchisees. Mm-hmm. We are known for our after-school programs, our summer camps, birthday parties, and then also workshops. There's a saying at Idea Lab, when school is out, Idea Lab is in.
And look, you became a stronger, better company as a result of COVID.
Yeah, I guess you put it that way. We truly tried. And, the pausing the franchises, I think, was something that was great because we said, we're okay with just slow to moderate growth. And accelerated growth will happen. It'll just happen at the right time. And
as somebody with your background, too, as being a franchisee, you were the right president of a company to get an organization through the pandemic because you were on the other side. You just weren't, preaching from the office. But, being the leader of a franchise organization is not easy. But there's a different respect, I think, that fellow franchisees have when they know it's somebody that's walked in their shoes, right? And maybe you don't have to even be a franchisee, but if you as the founder or president you had run an operation. When you get it, there's just a different level of respect, and you're in the business ultimately of providing hope and providing security and comfort to your franchisees. And I think that's it was a blessing for them that you were the person in charge.
Thank you for that compliment. That's appreciated. I will also say that the team that we have here, Frank, because one person alone cannot carry it all. So definitely
No.
we have a very committed and passionate team that supports me and supports the franchisees as well, because they're always looking to see what can they do better for the franchisees, whether it's offering better coding classes. We enhanced those during the pandemic, or better cooking classes. So, we've been working on some of those that we do. So for a family that comes into our facility, like I've got a girl and a boy child, if they have different interests or varying interests, you kind of have everything in that STEM plus arts space that can be offered under one facility.
Well, it does take a village to build a franchise organization. And first of all, I will tell you that my team, probably just like yourself, they make us look good. My team absolutely made me look good. They allowed me to do what I did best, but I always hired people that were better than me in every category. And I think, we can never forget that that's what it takes to really build a franchise organization. So with that said, tell me about how many people are on your corporate team and how do we make the machine tick? What do they all do?
Sure, yeah. So we have about 14 employees here at the corporate organization. And then we also have a bunch of lesson plan and script writers. So I'd mentioned we've started creating these videos or built out a video platform that gets used by the franchisees. So we take our existing lessons, the group of script writers goes through them, analyzes them, tests those scripts and those experiments, and then converts them to an actual script, which gets filmed. So, I call them part-time because those are, that's a seasonal role for us where we work on, if we're working on our summer camp lessons, that's where we need more of our lesson plan and script writers. But that's the total group. And overall, we're in this environment of being hybrid. So we've kind of got employees all over the nation. That works out really well with supporting our franchisees as well.
In terms of helping franchisees getting clients, tell me about your marketing.
Sure. So we pride ourselves in creating digital assets that the franchisees need. So we have, whether it's email campaigns, social media, or even any of their, for their social media on a monthly basis, we have a social media package that our marketing team puts out. And I see some of them just literally copy pasting that, because that is the goal of it, is that a franchisee who is wearing so many multiple hats doesn't have to worry about what they put on their social media pages. Right. And then we also encourage them to gather their own voice from their community, whether it's community posts or pictures, whatever they can do in terms of being compliant with the regulations that they've got in their area and territory. We kind of encourage them with that.
And what about the franchisees themselves? Like, who is your ideal franchise owner? Do they have to have a STEM background? Can they be just a business person?
It can be anybody. It can be a business person. It can be somebody who's just looking to give back to the community. I think the saying that we've said internally within our organization that would be great to share with you is, we look for someone who can be the mayor in their community. And what that means is someone who's really championing, who might be PTO president, just doesn't hesitate to go do the right thing for their community. I think that is the big part here, because you would need to communicate with your schools in the neighborhood, talk to them, see if they're open to the after school program, bring in families, and truly care about, it goes back to that passion that we were talking about earlier, truly being passionate about educating this next generation.
Right. And as a franchisee, then, am I hiring a manager or director to actually run the facility?
So we have two models. We have a franchisee run model where you could do it yourself, along with teachers that you hire for your location, or we have locations that have managers. So I'd mentioned Adam, who's our franchisee in Austin. He was doing it himself, and then recently since he's working on a second location, he hired a manager or director for his location. And it does depend on your licensing requirements in your state. If there is a requirement to have somebody there who's licensed.
Interesting. You kind of touched on that earlier, and I totally missed that early on. Tell me about the licensing requirements, just overall. What would be some of the licensing requirements that I would expect in some states?
In some states, Frank, there might be an age requirement for your teachers.
Okay.
So you might have a state which says after school, they call them after school paraprofessionals, need to be at least 18 years or older. So we really guide our franchisee to looking up what their requirements are in their states, because it really differs state to state. Like, I don't even know exactly. In Texas, I know we've got a little bit more laxer regulations around some of those spaces, but being in compliance is because these children are in your care. There are no parents, right? You could be picking up a 5-year-old and bringing them to your facility, and then they're staying with you from the afternoon up until the time that they actually get picked up. So regulations are something that would be big in terms of anybody who's looking at this space as a prospect franchisee.
Well, that's obviously going to come into play in building out my franchise system. And also, as a multi-unit potential franchise owner, I want to go back to, what was the gentleman's name in Austin?
Adam.
Yes. Okay. So like Adam's role is going to change now, because now in order for him to grow his business, he's going to have to get out of his own way, right? He's going to have to hire a manager or somebody to run it. It's going to make him a better business owner as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I've done that, right? I was an operator that operated 4 locations of a different franchise. And I had a top performing location to one that did not perform so well all the way. So, I wore different hats for all those locations. We had 60 part-time employees at those locations. And it really changed my role as every location was added on, from just being the manager at every single location to now really, being the strategic leader, where you're trying to get everybody together towards working around the same mission, vision, almost like they say, like rowing in the same direction, because that's truly when magic happens.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's okay for a franchisor. I'm speaking to you as someone who was a franchisee in the past. It's okay for the franchisor and franchisee to have that push-pull relationship. We got to be rowing in the same direction, but let's face it, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be disagreement at times, but strategically we need to be pulling in the same direction.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, there could be a lot of positive energy out of conflict. And at least that's what happened. That's what happened to me in my career.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, life would be too boring if there was not any conflict, right? And
I could say this now, but looking back then, I probably didn't appreciate it. I'm like, oh, good, conflict. Something good's going to come out of this. Heck no, I was probably stressed out of my mind at the time. But I look back and we grew because of the challenges. You don't grow when you're succeeding. You grow when you're having a challenge, or, when you're putting out a fire.
Yeah, so true. Just yesterday we had, I'm local here in Houston, so I had a EdTech panel that I put together. And the topic of that EdTech panel was, why do education companies fail? Controversial topic, but exactly that one question brought about so many stories and nuggets on challenges during failure, and how startups, entrepreneurs, founders, came out of those challenges successfully.
And what's your opinion? Why do you think most fail?
Yeah, I think it's, I would maybe narrow it down to focus, Frank. Just staying uber focused to your mission and really knowing what are you trying to do. As putting my franchisor hat on, when we started building this franchise, we had to really, buckle down on compliance and understand what is it that we are really putting together. We cannot do everything for the franchisee, right? There's things that they have to do. So sure. It took us as a system, some time to understand that it's really, we're providing them with a standard set operating procedure and great programming that then can be replicated and created in their environment or in their community, bring it out into their community. So really, I think if a franchisee comes in and doesn't have that laser focus on what exactly are they going to do, and maybe knowing their strengths, right? I think I, as a leader, a lot of times think back to what my strengths are, and I try to surround myself with people that can offset those strengths or my weaknesses, so that I've got somebody else to lean on in those spaces. So I would encourage your listeners to think a lot about their strengths when they're considering whether it's a franchise they're opening or their first startup business. Just be uber focused and think about your strengths and what you bring to the table.
What do you think of some other traits that you would say are really important in order for a franchisee to be successful, specifically with Idea Lab?
So specifically with Idea Lab, I think the first thing would be, passion around wanting to grow the next generation and really give back to the community. And I say give back because that's where growth happens. When you're having fun and you're running all these awesome classes, growth is naturally going to come out of it. Versus, when you're really uber focused on those numbers, maybe. And then the second thing I would say is just being someone who is in the quest of learning and wanting to learn, because I think that's something for me as a person individually, learning will never stop. So if you're in that right mindset of this is a franchise system, I'm open to learning, you learn from not just the franchisor, you also learn from each other. I think that's where actually most of my learning came about, was either during franchise council get together or during webinars where other franchisees are sharing stories of success and what really worked in their market.
And what's been your biggest surprise thus far since you've been in franchising?
Oh, good question. I think my biggest surprise is the number of people that really have education touch them in their personal life. And I feel like every person I meet either has somebody in their family who's a teacher or being an after school provider or principal or somewhere related to education. And it's been in a good way because I feel that the moment I tell them what I do, there's so much interest on them learning more about our franchise and our brand in general. But I think in general, people are interested in education, whether it's their own children or, the community around them and what they can do to improve that space.
Sure. And unfortunately, due to budget cuts and resources, it's now taking organizations or taking franchise companies such as yourself to supplement kids' education.
Yes, absolutely. And, something to that point would be, that's where we train our franchisees on approaching schools, districts with this program that we've built, which I was mentioning, the video content that can be taken by anybody into it. We have a program called the On the Go program. So it's Idea Lab Kids on the Go. And we provide them with marketing for schools and districts. That to me is almost, Frank, like a low-hanging fruit, because you pick up the phone, call a school or district. There is a need out there,
Yes.
And they all want more STEM programming and STEM lessons that are relevant for their children. So it takes a certain mindset for the franchisee to do that, because you're always looking at filling up your four walls with the number of students that you have. But there's also business that can be done outside your facility where you can take your program to all these great schools and districts.
Yes. And Devina, that's for your franchisees, that's really diversification of their business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, seasonality, that way you're not impacted when, all of a sudden it's winter break and everybody's traveling.
Right. That was a challenge too with I9 Sports, was that we were a seasonal business, of course. The spring season and the fall season were our biggest seasons. So managing the franchisees' expectations of their financials was a challenge, right? They were flush with cash going into the fall season. And then once the season is off to the races and they've taken in the registration fee, now it's all nothing but expenses that are coming out. Now they're just it's just sucking out their business out of their bank account. Same thing with your business, where if it's seasonal and you have an alternative programming of working with the schools, that's just going to smoothen everything out. And I think it's going to also take a lot of stress off of the franchisee.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Frank.
How big is an Idea Lab facility, generally speaking?
Yeah, so our average locations are between 2,200 square feet to about 2,800 square feet. There's 6 rooms in the facility. So there is a kitchen, there's a maker space, there's a computer room where all our coding classes are held. And then you also have a birthday party room and a studio. Some of these locations have a gym. It just depends on the layout of the space. And again, back to those requirements, which are so different state by state.
Mm-hmm. And are they typically in like shopping centers or standalone? Where do you like to place them?
Typically shopping centers. So, again, you don't have to be in the top grade A facility. It could be at any shopping center, as long as there's an anchor tenant in that facility that brings people into it. Because we typically, with our sizes, tend to be, the mid-sized suite that would be in that space. But, we get a lot of drive-by traffic or people just seeing our banner or our flyer or, balloons outside.
Mm-hmm.
Walk into kind of our locations. I could also share a story there that our location in Katy, Texas had opened. They had been working on their facility opening and were trying to open in the summer, which is a really busy time for us. But their grand opening got pushed out to November, which is close to Thanksgiving. And then by then, everyone's checked out for the holidays. But this franchise operator did such a great job of their grand opening that they had hundreds of people in the entire parking lot. They made it about all the neighboring businesses and they made it a big event. So there was a bounce house, there were classes you could do with Idea Lab. There was just like a big party happening in that entire strip mall just to announce that Idea Lab Kids was now in Katy. So I think that was something that, really got that location a lot of good press. And it was all thanks to the franchise owner and her working on it for, several months, if not weeks at a time.
What a great way of opening, right?
Right, exactly. Open with a big bang.
Yeah, seriously. And what a great territory too. Not to mention Katy, Texas is an awesome territory. Yeah. You have so much to be proud of and you're making a difference in kids' lives. Devina, what would you say you're most proud of though, since taking over Idea Labs?
I would really say most proud of the lessons that we've created because those are truly things that I see being impactful. And I can probably share, Frank, a personal story there. My daughter has attended our entrepreneurship classes, and these classes are really cute where it's a week-long summer camp and or a week-long program. And the child goes through, they build their business or their prototype if they're building a product. And at the end of it, the parent actually attends a session where the child pitches to the entire class what their product or their prototype is, and everybody gets to put a smiley face or a frowny face on if you were investing in them or not. So, it just it put such a big smile on my face and my heart just to see not just my child, but all these other children in that room, working on their leadership skills, their presentation skills. And, you've got little 8-9-year-olds going through this program that just, is getting them ready for the jobs of tomorrow.
That puts a smile on my face. Just think it's a little Shark Tank.
I know. There you go.
That's so cute. What's one of the biggest challenges that you faced as a franchisor, and how did you overcome it? What did you learn from it?
I definitely would say the shutdown that we went through during the pandemic. Schools and districts that we were working with during that time as well, Frank, told us that we're not allowing any third-party germs to come into our facilities. So those were definitely very challenging times for us as a system and for our franchisees. And our biggest goal as a franchisor was how do we sustain our franchisees to survive and get past this time, right? I know there were several things that, the Canadian government was giving out grants. So was, you had different options here in the US. We did what we could to support our franchisees and, thankfully we got through that time. But that definitely, for us and the franchisees, we could feel, the pain of the lockdown and just, parents being afraid of germs and things like that. We did a whole bunch of online classes during that time, Frank, which is what actually led into the building of all of the video content as well, because we realized that, oh my gosh, we were arming our teachers with lesson plans, which either they had to print or they had to look at an iPad to follow along with. Why not digitize these lessons to make it easily accessible? A lot of our franchises used those video content during that time to either do asynchronous lessons, which could be offered online, on Zoom and things like that. And then, of course, they pivoted to bring families back into the facility once the lockdown was not as strict in their community.
Sure. It was so smart. I mean, you focused on infrastructure and innovation during a tough time. And the other lesson that to be learned about this, I think, personally, my opinion is that Idea Lab is going to be recession resistant, being in the child-related space. But there are other franchisors out there that are listening to this that may not be in a recession resistant business. And whatever they did during COVID, it was that learning experience to know that whatever they did during COVID, a future recession, whatever that hell may be, it's going to allow them to be able to adapt and say, how are we going to grow through that and to be able to break through that and survive? Because surviving, whether it's a pandemic or recession, is a huge challenge, right? Like any is for any company. But a franchise organization, when you're leading a franchise company, the responsibility is so much bigger because now it's not just your employees, but it's all the franchisees and their employees. And it's a huge weight on our shoulders, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Devina, what's your vision for Idea Lab?
I think I said this earlier, where we're happy with moderate growth because we don't want growth to happen at the expense of success for our franchisees. We want all of them to be successful. I would love for to see us where we are able to support, as many locations as we can. We've got the systems, we've got the right curriculum in place. So we have all of that. So we are primed and we're ready for growth. So if anybody listening is interested in the brand, look us up. Look us up on our website. It's idealabkids.com.
Cool. And what advice do you give to people? Because obviously you're not just trying to sell a franchise to anybody. So I'm curious, Devina, what advice do you give to people that are considering joining your brand as a franchise owner?
Yeah, I think it would be the same advice that I give even to my friends who are thinking of pivoting to just small business ownership in general. Really think about, is this something that you can do as for yourself or for your family? I think the best advice I got from my dad when I purchased my first franchise was, the money that you're putting away in that business, or whether you're getting a small business loan or however you're doing it, make sure that that's money that you can put away, and if it doesn't grow, if it doesn't come back, it's not going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. I think that was very sound advice from my dad back then, and I give that to everybody I talk to, is grow within your means. If you have to start with one location or two, if you can grow from there, and versus looking at multiple locations. Yeah, so just really think this decision through, and it might be for you, it might not. Some people are happy with. I left my corporate job to do this, but I tell everybody that salary is almost like a drug. You get addicted to it, and getting it in your bank account month after month, regardless of how many students I have enrolled in my program, is a whole different lifestyle, right?
Yeah, and success is one thing, but when you agree, fulfillment is another. That's a whole nother level. And
I love how you say that, success versus fulfillment, right?
Yeah. Fulfillment is what keeps you, what makes you feel alive. And I feel success, for me, success short-term, like you're always looking for that next level of success. And that drug it's never enough until you feel fulfilled. Because when you're fulfilled in what you do, you operate at a completely other level. Like, to me, business is a spiritual game.
I love that. I'm going to use that tagline, Frank. This is a spiritual game.
I think it is. It
is so true, because, we hear this from people around us, right? Oh my gosh, it's Monday and I wake up and I don't want to do what I need to do. But, for me, every day is amazing. Every day is a challenge, and every day is different. Right. That's the other thing with being a business owner and operator. There's something new going on every single day, and just to be able to embrace that with passion.
And to embrace those challenges, because it's going to only make you a better entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Devina, I always finish with a tip jar, because the franchise community is just so generous, sharing best practices. So what do you got? If there's a aspiring franchisor or somebody that wants to franchise their concept, what would you tell them?
I would tell them truly look at your business model and make sure it is a franchisable concept, and make it as strong as possible, so that if you've got 10 locations versus 100, you are scalable for as many locations as possible. And that's kind of what we did with our processes, is we have them set in place and set in stone for scale and for growth. And just really, know your business inside out, and your various factors that run your business, and what you're looking for in your prospect franchisee. And it's okay to say no. The number of applicants we've said no to just because we don't think it's a good fit is absolutely okay.
I love it. I hope everybody heard that piece of advice. It's so critical to succeed in franchising, is not be afraid to tell people no if they're not a right fit. For
Absolutely.
Sure. All right. One more time. How can somebody find out about Idea Labs franchise? Tell me again.
Sure. Yeah. So you could look us up under idealabkids.com. And if you're interested in franchising, we have a whole ton of information out there. And feel free to reach out to us.
Devina, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure meeting you. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.